early Byzantine, mid-Byzantine, late Byzantine mindset hasn't created necessarily that specific category.
Which surprises me, frankly, because in Slavic countries, alcohol has always been a problem. I mean, that's part of the literature, that's part of the ethos, that's part of the whole...
Yeah, alcohol's just about every corner of the world has something having to do with fermenting something and abusing.
Let's not pick on
Don't
the
forget
Slavs.
Noah.
I just came back from Ireland, and so I understand completely. Dr. Rossi, we were talking about denial before we kind of moved in some other directions. Is our culture clear about the destruction of addiction, or is there great denial in the culture as well? I see our culture as really promoting chemical and drug dependence, and we see ads, we see all this stuff. Are we clear about it in our culture at large?
Kevin, if you don't mind, I'd like to back up and say a word about teens and children.
Sure, go ahead.
A parent of 2 kids and 3 grandchildren. There are a number of questions here. What are the telltale signs, which you asked? But then the next question is, okay, now I have some telltale signs. What do I do about it? My kid is likely to be an alcoholic. I was talking to a woman just the other day before yesterday who has 2 daughters who are anorexic. Well, it's pretty clear, and that's a whole separate topic, anorexia and bulimia, that these both girls, but there are males who are that way.
Linking the ancient Christian faith with modern technology. You're listening to Internet-based Ancient Faith Radio.
It's time now for Stewardship Calling with your host, Bill Marianis. Bill is a stewardship evangelist whose Stewardship Calling ministry is focused on helping people, parishes, and Christian organizations discover and live their stewardship callings and embrace true stewardship and generosity so that they may have a good account before the awesome judgment seat of Christ. Here's Bill.
Go and make disciples of all nations, Matthew 28:19. Go and do likewise in service to others, Luke 10:37. Be witness to me in Jerusalem and all of Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth, Acts 1:8. I have made you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring salvation to the end of the earth, Acts 13:46. As the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you, John 20:21. Give thanks to the Lord, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the peoples, proclaim that his name is exalted, Isaiah 12:4. And the gospel must first be proclaimed to all nations, Mark 13:10. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, that you have love for one another, John 13:35. By this, my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples, John 15:8. And every day in the temple and from house to house, they did not cease teaching and preaching Jesus as the Christ, Acts 5:42. Let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven, Matthew 5:16. Brothers and sisters, I could literally do this all night. This is how extremely clear the Lord made his instructions to us as the descendants of his apostles. His words were always action-oriented and not passive. So the question is, did we hear him? And if not, why not? And if yes, then what are you and we and our churches doing to fulfill any of these clear instructions? Tonight, we dig into the critical topics of outreach and evangelism and philanthropy, 3 of the essential pillars of any Orthodox Christian, in fact, of any effective Christian parish, and certainly especially true of those that claim to be Orthodox Christian churches. Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to Stewardship Calling in the first Wednesday series on Ancient Faith Radio. This is Bill Marianis from stewardshipcalling.com and Orthodox Ministry Services, coming to you live from the shores of beautiful Lake Lanier in Gainesville, Georgia, just north of Atlanta. I have a simple premise that you have been called by your Creator to a personal calling, a reason to your life and a reason for your life, something you need to do with all of the gifts over which God has made you a steward. It's what I call your stewardship calling. And St. Paul makes it crystal clear that we all have a calling. In his letter to the Ephesians, chapter 4, verse 1, he clearly states, I beg you to lead a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called. Until 2017, by day, I was blessed to be a partner in two great international law firms of over 1,100 lawyers each, where I served in management, including as managing partner of our Atlanta office and practice in the area of mergers and acquisitions and corporate law. But my why, my personal calling, is to be a stewardship calling evangelist. I'm here to help people in parishes discover and live their stewardship callings so that they may have a good account before the awesome judgment seat of Christ. As we follow Christ's great commandment to love one another, his great charge to serve one another, and his great commission to make disciples of all nations. Welcome to that journey. Now, this program and a lot of other helpful tools and information about effective churches and stewardship and church strategic planning and servant leadership and other topics can be found at my always free website, stewardshipcalling.com. And you can always reach me at bill@stewardshipcalling.com. That's bill@stewardshipcalling.com. And to all our listeners tonight, we want you to join us by calling in and interacting with my special guest by calling at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. The topics of philanthropy and outreach and evangelism isn't new to Stewardship Calling. I mean, if you're a regular listener, you've heard me and many guests discuss it many previous times. I do it not because I think y'all aren't paying attention. I do it because that is what our Lord commanded us to do. He didn't just ask nicely and hope we responded. He actually gave us a commandment. And back in Christ's time, the Jews knew that there was only one person who could give commandments. Kings and rulers could pass laws, but only God could give a commandment. That was their core understanding. So imagine the shock of some when they heard Christ offer a new commandment, as he did in John 13, 34, 35. To some, it was earth-shattering. It blew them away. It was also simultaneously awe-inspiring and challenging and seemingly impossible. But those are the facts. Those were the instructions the apostles received, and those instructions were handed down to us by the apostles and the disciples that followed them, and by our fathers and mothers. This is what has been passed on to us because the commandment came from the Lord. So this is why, again tonight, we discuss the critically important questions of what are you and your parish doing to follow our Lord's commandment and instructions, and what specifically are you doing in the areas of philanthropy and outreach and evangelism. Now, let me be clear. I'm not asking for me. I have no authority. I'm merely a lone sinner's voice in the wilderness pointing in the direction of the light, the word, the truth, and the way. You can fail to follow his commandment at your own peril, but he got my attention. So do you think that you and your parish are doing enough in the areas of philanthropy or outreach or evangelism? I mean, every time I foolishly think I can answer that in the affirmative, I hear the powerful words of St. Paisios the Athonite, and I quote, "The spirit of lukewarmness reigns. We've been spoiled for good. How does God still tolerate us?" Today's generation is the generation of indifference. There are no warriors. The majority are fit for parades and feasts only. Even people who've got something inside have begun to grow cool, saying, can I really do anything to change the situation? We have to witness our faith with boldness, because if we continue to remain silent, we'll have to answer in the end. In these difficult days, each must do what is in their power. Leave what's out of their power to God. In this way, our conscience will be clear. End quote. Okay, don't fuss at me. Those aren't my words, although they do sound like something I'd be inclined to say from time to time. Now, these are the words of one of our revered modern saints. Listen to today's generation is the generation of indifference. There's no warriors. The majority are fit for parades and feasts only. Holy cow. I don't think anyone could have been more direct, clear, and insightful. In other words, congratulations for what you've done. Good for you. But that's not enough. The world is still filled with need, and you are still alive with the gifts and the blessings your Creator gave you. Now get in the game before you go home permanently. Be a warrior, not just sitting at the feasts and parades. St. Paisios makes it clear, quote, in this way our conscience will be clear, end quote. So again, no excuses. You are called to excel in philanthropy, outreach, and evangelism, so let's get busy. Do we have work to do? You're darn tootin', lots of it. Let me give you just one example. In an amazing article from August 15, 2019, entitled Reviving Evangelism for the Next Generation, Barna Research Group President David Kinnaman makes a clear case for how serious we need to get about these topics. He summarized an enormous amount of data that the very respected Barna Research Group compiled that lays bare our inadequacies in the areas of philanthropy, outreach, and evangelism. So let me offer you a few direct quotes. Quote, a majority of practicing Christians do not consistently support evangelism. And almost half of millennial Christians believe it is flat out wrong to evangelize, end quote. He goes on to say that while Christianity in the United States has always been in a perpetual state of reinvention, cultural and demographic changes over recent decades have actually led to a season of unprecedented change. He notes that the overall number of practicing Christians is falling, and the cultural backdrop is increasingly tribal and sometimes difficult to define. Bottom line, he suggests that we need to consider what the gospel faithfulness looks like today. He goes on to say that our calling as Christians was never about demographic dominance, nor is it about cultural survival, nor simply about securing the faith of the next generation, as important as that is. He concludes by saying the church's mission is to spread the message of saving, sacrificial love, and ultimate hope that Jesus commissioned his followers to proclaim. It's not just about growth, it's about the good news. And he summarized in a book called Reviving Evangelism, the most recent research that was commissioned by Alpha USA as a study to assess both active Christians and non-Christians' perceptions and experiences relating to faith serving and spiritual seeking. Now, the research interviewed two groups of people, practicing Christians who said that their faith was important in their life and have attended church within at least the last month, and then all other U.S. adults, which included non-Christians and people who identified as Christian but don't prioritize or practice the faith. They call themselves lapsed Christians. Here's what they concluded. A majority of practicing Christians do not consistently support evangelism. They went on to conclude that among practicing Christians, millennials report an average of 4 close friends or family members who practice a faith other than Christianity. Most of their baby boomer parents and grandparents, by comparison, have just one friend that practices a faith other than Christianity. Their research also showed that sharing the gospel today is made harder than at any other time in recent memory by an overall cultural resistance to starting conversations that highlight people's differences. Further, he goes on to point that society has cast a kind of a negative light on proselytization that many older Christians don't fully appreciate. In the Barna research that was published in Spiritual Conversations in the Digital Age, they reported that 65% of Christian millennials believe that people today are more likely than in the past to take offense if they share their faith. And for frame of reference purposes, that percentage was 27 percentage points lower at 28% of people who they thought would take offense among baby boomer Christians. And they also discovered from their research that practicing Christians' ideas about what is most important to people considering Christianity don't always match up with reality. Here's what's interesting. Their data showed that non-Christians are most concerned with the evidence for Christianity and the overall reputation of the faith. But practicing Christians think that a firsthand spiritual experience is the most salient factor. And so what practicing Christians perceive about non-Christians is actually closer to the lapsed Christian priorities. Now, this led to a very sobering conclusion of their extensive research. And here's what they said, quote, we must start by passing on resilient faith to Christian young people, planning especially for the pivot point of the high school and college age years. The dropout problem is real, and it has a chilling effect on the overall evangelistic environment in churches. It's impossible to exactly trace the impact of lapsed Christians on non-Christians, but sobering to consider that the de-evangelistic clout of those who leave the faith. The Barna team has been documenting and trying to understand the dropout problem for more than a decade, and we've become more convinced that faith for the next generation must top the church's list of priorities. So now what, Ollie, do you ask? Well, here's an interesting conclusion from the data. In a study on the habits and attitudes related to generosity, Barna found that millennials, more than older generations, highly prize hospitality, to make space for others, to welcome them into your life. It's understood by many young adults to be the very definition of generous. So increasing isolation and digital exhaustion actually prompt strong cravings for an in-person relationship and a warm human connection. So as I've been saying for decades, it's true that the mob was wrong when they said it's not personal, it's just business. In fact, it's deeply personal. And to make the point of this critical importance of our personal and parish outreach, evangelism, and philanthropy work, Barna's president, David Kinnaman, concluded all of the sobering assessment and the data with the following clarion call to action. And again, I quote, "People's need for Jesus hasn't changed. Many today are missing a sense of purpose and meaning. They're asking deep questions of identity. Who am I? What does it mean to be human?" Reviving evangelism in our day will require a gospel response to these kinds of questions. And they said that our message of new life in Christ must connect to the inner yearnings of a potential Christian for abundance, forgiveness, purpose, meaning, even relationship. The connection is where the best questions are asked and where the truest answers are found, not in the back of a textbook. If we hope to share the good news in such a way that people can actually receive it, we must have a gospel response to what's happening now. Cultural discernment is learning to connect Jesus to the reality of life today. That isn't just being trend-wise, but also being soft and sensitive to the leaning and the leading of the Holy Spirit, who forms our efforts to know the times and give us ears to hear what the Lord is saying, end quote. So my brothers and sisters, according to the data, according to the evidence, according to our own observations, we got a lot of work to do in the areas of philanthropy, outreach, and evangelism to fulfill all of these holy scripture passages that I shared at the beginning of tonight's program. And to help guide us on that path, after a short break, I'll introduce you to a clergyman who gets this and whose parish is actually doing some exemplary work from which we might all learn. So we're going to take a short break right now. And when I return, I will introduce my special guest, Father John Kokolas, and we'll explore in greater depth some of what we can do personally and in our parishes in the area of philanthropy, outreach, and evangelism. Please remember, we'd love to hear your questions or comments, so feel free to call in tonight at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. In fact, you can even call in and share with us what maybe you or your parish is doing in these critical areas. So let's take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Bill will be right back, but the lines are open if you want to ask a question or offer your thoughts. The number is 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO.
Big in Heaven, a collection of short stories available now on the Ancient Faith bookstore. Sometimes poignant, sometimes funny, sometimes heartbreaking, sometimes convicting. These stories of life in an inner-city immigrant Orthodox parish are guaranteed to shake your assumptions and make you see your life and faith in a new way. They are not for the faint of heart, but they are very much for all who want to embrace the truth more fully.
And you didn't have to ask Raskova for help. Cleaning, polishing, carrying in or out. Any work in the church, the woman was a stalwart, a tovarish you could count on. No one knew her suffering. They never bothered to look into her eyes. It surprised me that most of the church folks at St. Alexander, the Whirling Dervish Parish, didn't even know her name. It wasn't anything they thought about.
To find this book and others like it, you can go to store.ancientfaith.com. Again, that is store.ancientfaith.com.
Stewardship Calling is back, and we are ready for your call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here again is Bill Marianis.
Welcome back to Stewardship Calling in our first Wednesday program, where my special guest is Father John Kokolas. Now, please remember, we'd love to hear from you by calling at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Now, I always ask my guests for their bios that I can share before I interview them. Well, Father John sent me absolutely the shortest bio I have ever seen. So his humility is preventing him from sharing with us all of the many wonderful things he's done. So as a result, I get to use my old lawyer cross-examination skills and get the truth out of this humble witness. But Father John Kokolas currently serves at the Nativity of Christ Greek Orthodox Church in Nevada, California. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with West Coast geography, Nevada is a city in northern Marin County in the North Bay region of San Francisco Bay Area. Father John grew up deeply involved in the Church of the Annunciation in Modesto, California, and earned a degree in business marketing from California State University, Stanislaus. Now, this should tell you something right from the start. We have a student of business marketing, so we can be sure that he gets some of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight. He went on to graduate with a Master's of Divinity from Holy Cross Theological Seminary in Brookline, and was ordained in 2012 and served the Church of Holy Cross in Belmont, California, as the assistant priest under the amazing clergyman and teacher, Father Peter Salmas. So my guest tonight moved to Nevada in 2016 and is blessed with a loving wife of 10 years and what he describes as two, quote, energetic, quick children, end quote. Can't wait to hear some examples of what it means to be an energetic child. But in any event, it's my privilege to welcome Father John Kokolas to Stewardship Calling on Ancient Faith Radio.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for having me.
It's so great for you to be here. Now, look, I just gave your bio, but it was so short, and there's always so much more to a person than their official CV. So we need to do a little bit more digging to tell us about your upbringing, your background, your family, and your calling.
Well, I appreciate that, Bill, but you have to realize when a lawyer asks you a question, you give only the most succinct response so that he can't question you or dive into that anymore. So know that was part of my my reasoning there. But
yeah, well, the problem is, Father, that this is my show, and so I can keep asking questions. Okay, so let's do this.
Let's do it. So, as you said, I'm born and raised in Modesto, California, in the Central Valley, which we proudly proclaim to be the agricultural capital of the world. We were involved in, again, the Modesto community, where my father served as a pharmacist. My mother was and continues to be what we proclaim as a primary zookeeper, as we refer to our household as a zoo all the time with 4 children. But it was just an environment where, Sunday mornings was dedicated to God, and we were all there regardless of what was happening. So it was with really that upbringing with my parents and the strong community that was in Modesto that really involved me in the church, that regardless of what I was going to do with my life, I knew I was going to be involved in the church in some type of capacity. So again, I was blessed to be able to meet my loving wife that we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary, and 2 loving kids, George and Marina. George is about to be 5 and Marina's 2.5. So first week of preschool happened this week, so we're really excited about that.
Oh, wow. So you got your first taste a small taste of the old empty nest syndrome at this early age, huh?
Small taste, Bill.
Yeah. All right, so let's go back a little bit further over here, because so in high school, somehow you end up going and studying business marketing.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about that, and then when the journey came to go to the seminary.
Yeah, so out of high school, I ended up going to CSU Stanislaus because of the fact that there was it was close. I commuted to school every day, and I was able to get a good education from a local college. There we had a strong business school which put me into that, and I pursued business marketing. And so every college student sooner or later is inundated with the daunting question of, what are you going to do with your life? And so knowing
if the students aren't inundated with it, every old person like me is constantly asking everybody that question.
Exactly. Well, it's when you finish high school, it's what are you doing next? When you finish college, or what are you doing next? You're going more school, you're choosing something. So I had struggled with my calling to attend seminary for quite some time. But what ended up happening in my senior year of schooling in business school, I knew that this question, and I was asking myself the same question. But in my senior year, we had organized several CEOs and successful businessmen to speak to our classes in our business school. And I was personally expecting them to say different scenarios or business strategies or key to be successful. What they ended up all saying, independently of one another, was do what you're passionate about. The only reason that I'm successful is because I'm doing what I'm passionate about. And this is what every successful businessman said. And it really gave me the perspective to ask myself, what am I passionate about? And because of my upbringing with my family and my involvement in the church, I did have a very strong priestly mentor, Modesto, Father John Magolius, that really perpetuated me to stop fighting this calling of going to seminary, because ultimately my passion was for the church. And that's what led me to leave for Holy Cross and eventually get ordained and serve the church as a priest.
All right, now, you've thrown your first fellow colleague under the bus, and somebody who I suspected was integrally involved in bringing you to the church, the amazing Father John, who is really such an incredible priest and person in his own right. And I'm not surprised that his great influence was a great source of encouragement for you. But if you can, and if you don't want to, that's okay. But can you share just a little bit more about, you said you were fighting against this calling thing, and tell us a little bit more about what was going on in your head and, more importantly, your heart.
Well, it's a big decision. You know, I knew, as I referred to, again, my I knew I was going to be involved in the church, whatever capacity I choose. But going to seminary is a big deal. And serving the church as a priest is a big deal. And for me was a serious decision that I was looking upon. So me struggling with it, I wanted to do it without any resistance. And when I made that decision, I wanted to be sure of it. Because I was involved in the church at such a young age, again, I received different comments or pressures from people just expecting me to go to seminary. And that's what really pushed me to try to fight it off, because I didn't want to go just because people were expecting me to do it.
Okay. That makes sense.
I was expecting myself to do it. I wanted to make sure that it was something that I wanted to do for me. And you know, as you're referring to, we all have our own calling and service to the church, and I had to find my own path. And again, it was really finishing my last year of studies that I really realized that truly was my own personal decision to go.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Now, where'd you meet Presbytera? As long as we're getting personal here.
You're right. We were actually introduced by another close family friend, Father Michael Previs and Presbytera Mattia. Presbytera was raised in the Castro Valley Church in the Resurrection Church in Castro Valley. So they introduced us. And from then we continued our relationship.
Well, that's the part that we oftentimes forget. In fact, one of these days I'm going to do a program just with the presbyteros, because we see the priest up front and we see the sacrifices that we impose upon them, but the sacrifices on the presbytera are just so much more in so many different ways. So we're gonna focus more about that. Now, what I wanted to do to kind of set the stage is for you to tell us a little bit about your parish and some of the amazing work that you've been getting into, because I first had the opportunity to listen to some of the stuff that y'all are doing at your parish in a program that the Metropolis of San Francisco hosted on Stewardship, a monthly program where you kind of condensed a lot of the stuff you're doing. So first, tell us a little bit about Nativity of Christ Church and its background, its history, its demographics, its makeup, the location, and generally anything else that you think it would be helpful for us to know about Nativity Church that will set the stage as we start to get into some of the specific things that you're talking about.
Of course. So Nativity of Christ, as you said earlier, is located in Marin County, which is just 30 minutes north of San Francisco, in the city of Novato. And its size would consist of, on the books, about 260 families, obviously serving probably close to 350 families in the area. It was founded by parishioners who didn't want to drive an hour to church anymore. There were enough Greeks in the area in Marin County to where they all came together and said, why don't we have our own church? And from that excitement and grew. We just celebrated 2 years ago our 50th anniversary, which was an exciting time for our parish, where so many of our founders are still alive, able to celebrate with us. So a young parish from that perspective, in a way. But it was founded by, again, people who just wanted a church that was closer to them. So we do have, what I would say is probably one of the strengths of the parish, is that it's diverse from the perspective of there's a good combination of Greek immigrants as well as first, second generation Greeks, a good mix of converts, a good mix between seniors and young families. So it's really been an opportunity for us with its diversity to try to offer as many diverse ministries that we'll get into later as possible, because we have that great mix of parishioners that attend services at Nativity of Christ.
Well, and it would seem to me, I mean, everybody knows about, the historical beauty of the Bay Area and all of the areas that surround it and whatnot. Is Nevada in that area growing? Is that, I know there's, obviously limitations given the cost of living and things of that nature, but is that still a growing area? And if so, what's driving that?
I would say there's somewhat growth. The probably most difficult for there not to be more growth is just because we're limited on space. Right. We're surrounded by water, and then we're also surrounded by open space and mountains that really we can't build upon. So it's the combination of those two things that we're really not growing in numbers or population, but we are growing from popularity. I would say that it continues to be a desirable place to live.
Yeah, right. Well, and one of the things that I, in my live Igniting the Flame program, that I cite is a beautiful map. The Gallup organization has been doing demographic research about Christianity in America literally since the 1950s. So we have like 70 years of really good data. And one of the things they produce is kind of their version of the red state, blue state map, only it's shades of green, right? So based on a wide array of metrics that they look at to determine what they call religiosity, how religious the people are in a state. The darker the green, the more the religious people are, the lighter, the less religious. It will come as no surprise to you that California and Washington and Oregon are almost very white in this map, while where I live here in the Bible Belt is very green. So It strikes me that if that is true about your area, and I would imagine it would be, that there is a huge opportunity for people that have lost their religious affiliation or lost their religious way, or maybe never even had one. Is that something you see as a future growth opportunity for Nativity of Christ?
It is no secret, Bill, that Marin County, where our church is arguably the most secular county in the entire country. And my philosophy and approach with that is that I really feel that the connection and the bridge between the secular and the spiritual is service.
Wait. Say that again. That is brilliant. I want everybody to hear that.
I really feel that the bridge between the secular and the spiritual is service. You opened it up nicely, Bill, which is we're all called to serve one another and to love your neighbor. And I feel, especially in a secular county like Marin, we're the evangelism, quote unquote, that is most important for us is to show people in our community that we care about them, that we're here to serve them. To not, scream on the rooftops or signs on the corners of the streets to tell them who Jesus Christ is, but to show who Jesus Christ is through our love for our neighbor. I really feel that is the avenue that is the best and most effective way to spread the gospel, especially in a county like ours.
Yeah, I think that is not only sound philosophy and logical, it's been historically proven. One of the things that has always been fascinating to me is that if you look back at history, at the time periods and in the locations where Christianity spread most explosively, almost virally, if you will, it was after plagues or other natural disasters or tragedies or other events. And the reason, and the two that we kind of go back to is, the Antonine Plague in the 2nd century literally killed 25% of the Roman Empire. And then just 1 century later, there was the plague of Cyprian right after both of those plagues, there was massive explosion in Christianity. And, some people speculate, well, maybe it was because people were, dying and they were finding faith. No, the reason is because, and I'm sure that's true for some, of course, but the reason is because the Christians stepped forward and served those in need and served those in crisis and served those who were having problems. And others watching that said, hey, what's with these Christians? These people are really good people. Maybe I ought to learn a little bit more about it. And fascinatingly, just kind of to finish my history lecture here, right? There was a pagan emperor, Julian, who actually bitterly complained about, and he called them the Galileans, how the Galileans were caring for even non-Christian sick people. Like that was a bad thing, like what are they thinking about? So juxtaposed against that historical background, which of course, as you point out, is scriptural in its foundation, you have brought that forward into a part of the country which, as you say, is whether it is the most secular or among the top 10, it's got to be up there. Right. And I think this is perhaps one of the things that is fascinating to me when I was listening to you talk about the story of Nativity of Christ Church, because so many of the clergy and faithful in areas, kind of throw up their hands and say, what can we do and whatnot. Well, you're actually in one of the most difficult mission fields, and y'all are doing a lot. So what I wanted to do is just start to lay down the foundation, because you actually have a phenomenal rubric that I want you to share with everybody about some of the fantastic things that you're doing in outreach and evangelism and philanthropy.
No, thank you, Bill. We were first connected through the Metropolis of San Francisco had a series of Stewardship Calling or Stewardship series on promoting stewardship. And one of the things that I felt needed to be emphasized is just basic, practical, and applicable examples of what we should be doing in the parish. As your listeners know, Bill, you talk a lot, right? And so there's so many good things that you say, but I think what is important again is to get down to these basic things. And so what in this presentation, what I tried to communicate was the two fundamentals of stewardship, which is what I call AC/DC ministries and showing people that you care, with strengthened ministries and continued examples and intentional and visible examples of showing people that we care about them. I think every church is going to have a stronger foundation so that when they do set up the stewardship team, the campaign, the themes, there's already a foundation laid upon them that, this is a strong parish that you want to be a part of. If we continue with this business model, you can't get investors for a product unless you first show them that you have a strong product for them to invest in. So how are we able to show that we have a strong product and we can do it with these two aspects, these two key fundamentals?
All right. So you've piqued everybody's curiosity, because when they hear AC/DC, there's a lot of different things that come to people's mind.
Of course.
I know you, and I know you have some really good magic behind that terminology.
Yeah, so I'm not encouraging everyone to invite Brian Johnson to be their lead Orthodox at their church. I am saying it is a long way to the top for us to have active, Christ-centered, diverse, and communicated ministries. So just some 4 adjectives that I came up with to really describe how we need to be approaching ministries. So the first being active, right? So when we send our parishioners their monthly bulletins, what do they see? Are they seeing a lively church and multiple opportunities for them to be able to participate into the life of the community through spiritual discussions, through community fellowship, through worship services? How active is our parish? And I couple also active that when people come to the church, how do they see their facilities? The presence of our facilities and our physical grounds matter. to how our parishioners and those visitors who come to our campus view our parish. If there's
all right, give me an example. Give me an example. Yeah.
If there's well-maintained grass that's freshly cut and watered frequently, and the bushes are not overgrown, and there's fresh paint both in the interior and the exterior, people are going to see that these facilities are loved and the people love their church, and it is an active church. If we're blessed with a 2,000-year-old tradition of faith, we don't need 2,000-year-old stained carpet in our Sunday school classrooms, right?
Amen.
So that's
Amen.
That's an indication of our ministries active. And so it's both from an activity standpoint, and it's also from the facility standpoint that I give two examples of how we can help ourselves reflect upon if we have active ministries at our church.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said and get you to flesh it out a little bit further, because you said something very powerful there. You said that in the bulletins and in the communications, the parishioners need to see the activity. Give us a little bit more detail about that.
Well, again, the goal of the monthly bulletin for me is to exactly share what exactly you just said, Bill, right? What are we communicating? And we have to be so intentional and visual with everything that we're doing. We as individuals can opt to be humble and not wanting people to see what we're doing for the church. And that's what we're all called to do. Our left hand shouldn't know what our right hand is doing. But when communicating when the church is doing, we have to be communicated and visual and visible and intentional with what we're doing. So when we see a church bulletin, when we look at all these different squares of a month, how many of those squares are filled up with something and how many of them are empty?
Yep.
And when we see a week go by, is Sunday morning the only opportunity for worship? Are there other opportunities on a weekly basis for either a liturgy, for a paraklesis, for a vespers? So when I see that, that calendar, is that what's the content of it, and why should someone feel invited to be involved in the parish? How many different opportunities are there?
Yeah, now you said a couple of really, really profound things that I want the listeners to pay close attention to, because we sometimes get a little pushback about this humility thing. And I love the way you articulated that, well, we have a personal call to humility. When we're sharing what's going on at the parish, we need to be visible and visual. And I think that's a great distinction. The other point that I think that you echoed very succinctly and very appropriately is the importance of the calendar and the schedule setting the signal of how active your parish is. And I'm assuming you post your calendar, right?
Well, we post our calendar. We include it. So our calendar and our monthly bulletin is not attached to the rest of the bulletin. It's an insert, with the hopes that people can take it out and put it on their refrigerators or have it more accessible. So it's all about people feeling that, the life of the church matters in their life and they're going to be paying attention to it. But I also just wanted to add to, Bill, what you said, because I personally struggled with that as well. How much we are communicating, or is it bragging, or is it being, look what we're doing at this parish and look how great we are. Because I struggled with that as well, as far as communicating what exactly we're doing. But I just consistently feel that seeing the way that other faith-based religions and organizations or nonprofits are communicating what they're doing to show excitement, to show energy, and to show an invitation. And I feel like that needs to be our motivation and our incentive to communicate what we're doing. But we also need to be communicating that with a humble pride, a Christian pride, but with also an energy to show that our parish is alive, our parish is doing good things. So it's important for the people to hear that and see that.
Absolutely. And let's face it. I mean, nobody wants to see something that's dead or dying, like you said, whether it's the appearance of the facilities or the lack of activity. How do you get that message across? I mean, do you have a communications team? I mean, I know you have a great background and you're very articulate, but how have you found as a successful way that maybe other parishes can consider to create that sense of energy and enthusiasm?
Well, I would say, Bill, it's again, probably the most prominent form of communication is our monthly bulletin that we send out to every parishioner every month in color. So
Beautiful.
I've been a part of parishes where they don't want to send it to everyone. They send it to black and white, or people who opt to receive it digitally, they don't send it to. After our 50th anniversary, where we were sending so many of our important communications in color to every parishioner, we got such a positive feedback from that we just decided we have to do this every month. That every month is to every parishioner, regardless if they signed up for a digital form. We send it to everybody, and it's in color to show that. And the second thing I would say is to diversify your communication through email, monthly bulletins, social media, and that hopefully all creates word of mouth, which is the most effective marketing, as we know, so that we're creating a sense of FOMO, fear of missing out. That's the goal in all of this. You are missing out if you're not part of the church community that you're called to be a part of.
Yeah, and I think that is so important, just as people think. Look, we can say all we want to, as you pointed out, the 2,000-year historical truth of the church, and yet at the same time, the world in which we live is a very visual world, and it's in color, right? I mean, so the pennies you think you're saving is really costing you in the level of enthusiasm engagement. That's awesome. Great advice, and I hope people listening will use this as the motivation to do that. So in that first A of the ACDC, in the level of action and activity, what else is there anything else you wanted to offer at this point?
No, again, I just emphasize those two facets, the calendar as well as the loving our facilities to communicate that we're an active parish.
Yeah, and I'm so glad to hear you say that, because one of the things we know is true is that if you walk into any business, whether it's a restaurant or anything else, you're going to have an immediate reaction, a visceral reaction to the environment that you're walking into, and even without the pride aspect of it, if we are the caretakers of God's house, it should not only be holy, but it should be worthy of the God that created us. So I think those are important messages.
I know people who will refuse to go back to a certain restaurant or establishment based upon the condition of their bathroom. They go into the bathroom. If they don't like it, they're not going to come back. No matter how good the food is, they're not going to come back. So it's that same approach that we have to have for our parish.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that, because one of the pieces of data that's out there, and everybody laughs when I quote it, but one of the pieces of data that's out there is that in the first impression category, interestingly enough, it's the woman's bathroom that makes the bigger difference. So that may say something about our male audience here, but one of the things that it's a very small and tactical thing, but one of the things that I strongly recommend is that everybody approach their restroom facilities, in particular their women's restroom facilities, with a white glove approach. Make it like mama's coming in next. Okay. All right. So we've digressed way off this thing here, but this is really important, good tactical information you're giving. So we got through the A. Take us to the first C.
The C is Christ-centered. I mean, if we're having ministries, how is it affecting our relationship with Christ? And that's what we have to be attentive and, again, intentional with every single ministry that we do. God gave us the two greatest commandments, which is to love God and to love neighbor. So in our Orthodox tradition, we love God by attending worship services, by participating in the sacramental life of the church. So are we incorporating each and every ministry that we offer to our people as part of our worship experience? So to include a paraklesis with our youth, to have, again, what we try to do is our seniors, our VIPs, very important parishioners, we try to convene with them after a feast day of the church so that they're able to come to church in the morning, and then we have fellowship for them afterwards. So integrating worship services and sacramental life with our ministries. And the second of that being loving our neighbor is that, again, this essence of philanthropy, this essence of service, are we integrating that with every ministry of our parish as well? So getting each and every ministry to have that aspect, that regardless of what ministry you're involved in the community, there are those two aspects intertwined with each of them being a testament to Christ-centered ministry of our parish.
All right, so those words make perfect sense, but give me an example of how, when you talk about the integration of the Christ-centeredness with the ministry itself, other than just the nature of service.
Right. So again, as I said, with the Goyans, we always tried to pray. So we had just had a Goya retreat, and we timed it so that it was on our campus with Saturday Great Vespers, with, like I said,
Okay.
with our seniors, incorporating that with feast days of the church. Always trying to do that, couple it with worship services. Even other ministries and other mommies and me or anything else, always incorporating prayer as far as a topic of conversation, as well as worship services on our campus.
Yeah. So one of the powerful, not so subtle, but appropriately visible messages you're sending, because people always complain about the fact that they really haven't established an active prayer life, or they don't always necessarily know how to pray best. But if every time they're doing something with the church, that is an integral part of what they're doing, it actually helps educate and inform them, doesn't it?
No, it does. And I think that was actually just brought up a conversation with a couple of ministry leaders, is being able to talk about prayer. Like, what is prayers? Because we get so accustomed to this communal prayer that we have with church, where the priest is leading and we should be participating in our prayer, but we're not actively maybe participating as much as we should be. And talking about what private prayer looks like. That private prayer could be us reciting the Lord's Prayer in front of our icons, but also
Right.
private prayer does look like standing in silence and opening our hearts and minds to hear what God has to say to us. I think that can't be emphasized enough, or can't be talked about enough, in understanding that we are called to have this stillness, this form of meditation in our everyday life as Orthodox Christians.
Yeah, and that is so hard in today's society, isn't it? I mean, that's just, and particularly I would imagine for a lot of the younger folks that are even more visual and more verbal and more engaged in social media and stuff like that. What are some of the things that you have found effective in helping, again, thinking about having other parishes think about ways that they might be able to implement some of what you're talking about in terms of creating this notion of stillness and prayer?
Well, I think we really had a huge opportunity with COVID. And to instill that, to not just to keep people understanding that church is just not a place that you go to. Church is in the home, that we have to make our home a microcosm of the church. And so by participating at home in the liturgy, by participating at home with COVID, hopefully everyone's coming back to church now, but finding this routine in our households, that we're dedicating first of all, we have to dedicate a certain location in our home to prayer.
Right.
We have to, whether it's in our room, whether it's in the hallway, where our icons are, that we have to dedicate a location of prayer, and we have to dedicate a time to pray. So those are two, I think, critical as far as setting up some type of prayer regimen in our personal lives in our home.
Yeah, and the fact that you're incorporating that with the ministries and the service that you're doing is reinforcing that notion that this isn't just a Sunday-only church.
Well, the Orthodox Church isn't a Sunday-only church, and we can't be Sunday-only Orthodox Christians. So it's a constant, everyday approach that we have to constantly emphasize to our people.
Yeah, and it's interesting. This past weekend, I was up in Grand Rapids doing a strategic planning program for an Antiochian parish, and the Saturday, it was a full day. We were working all day, but we obviously stopped in time for Vespers, and everybody literally went from the strategic planning retreat into Vespers. Of course, the priest joked that this is the most people he's had in Vespers in a long time. but it was interesting to me to watch what people said and how they interacted after the Vespers break, if you will, than right before it. There was a change. There was a metamorphosis. I mean, it's not like, people were completely changed, but it was a very different interaction and dialogue, right? And so that's an integral part of that. What are some of the other things that you do, Father, or that you've seen done, whether it's at Nativity or in other places, to really reinforce that first C, that Christ-centeredness?
Well, I think it's a responsibility, I would say, first and foremost, for us as clergymen to be intentional with that. And whether or not the priest was intentional in that we're going to have a strategic planning meeting right before Vespers so that everyone can come, not knowing if that was intentional or not, we as priests should make it intentional. And we as priests should always encourage that worship service, because in all of these teaching moments that we need to take advantage of, because you had an excellent example of how people were transformed in a way with Vespers. Oftentimes we have to always express that that's the point. The point is that we're ready and wanting to be transformed by God through these worship experiences. So anytime we're able to attract people, to get them in the church and to pray as a community, to feel the presence of God, that to me is the par excellence of anything that we can do.
Yeah. And so again, the key element, both as to the first level of what you were talking about, the active and the Christ-centeredness, is the phrase that you keep using over and over again, and rightfully so, is intentionality. That this, it isn't just an accident, it's something that you plan for and you build in, right?
Correct. Because if the more intentional we are as a parish, the more intentional then it will become for our people to receive that and to apply in their own lives. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. What are some of the techniques or strategies that you use to elevate the intentionality of it in and amongst the lay people who are coming at you with their own pressures and time issues, et cetera? Is there anything that you found that works better than other things to kind of create that intentionality?
I mean, when I'm referring to intentional, I'm referring to having it planned. I think from our perspective in planning these services and planning meetings, when you're setting up a time to meet with a young person, setting up a time to meet with a certain ministry, to make it intentional that you're tying it with something else that's happening at the church that could be of benefit to them. So if we're always conscious and attentive to that coupling of, making our child or children with the other ministries of our faith, with those worship services, I think the more obvious or hopefully more intentional again they will become by what they're experiencing through those.
Right. So that by being intentional in everything we do and the way we present it, it's also reinforcing the importance and the criticality of it to the next generations, right?
Correct.
Yeah. All right. So, Father, we have a caller on the line here, and and I'll tell you, man, he's a tough guy. He's a tough. I just want to give you a heads up on this, but he's also a dear friend, and he was the guy who I interviewed just a few short days ago at that parish that we were at in Grand Rapids, Michigan, the wonderful Antiochian parish of St. Nicholas. So, Dr. Sam Bander, are you here? Are you on the line? Is that really you?
It really is me, Bill and Father. I'm enjoying the podcast tonight, and mainly I'm listening because our wig is external service and evangelism, and it sounds like you're interviewing the expert.
Yeah, just wait till we start getting into some of the things that they're doing at Nativity, Sam, in terms of that. For those go ahead. Did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
Well, I had a question. The one thing stood out that Father said was the bridge between secular and spiritual is service.
Yes.
And that was a discussion we were just having at our roundtable last Sunday about what happens during the service when you're out in the community and you're being of service to a group of people. Yeah, you are evangelizing, but you're not acting. We didn't know the line either. Do you hand them a little card and say, or do you serve them? So that's my question.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up there just a little bit. Yeah. Can you repeat the question? You were just cutting out there for a second.
I'll make it brief. When you're doing service in your community, there is an evangelism component to it. Evangelizing and trying to bring people to the church, or are you simply serving people and hope that they see what you're doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say the important thing that we have done is just simply showing people that we're doing it. There's not a bait and switch type of mentality of approaching this. But again, being intentional and being visual is the key that I would say. When we make sack meals, we do this on a monthly basis, and we make sack meals for a local nonprofit that feeds homeless people. We on every sack meal we put a sticker that says "Made with Love by Nativity of Christ." That is our
beautiful.
that would say is our expression of evangelism, which is we're blessed that Christ is in our church's name, Nativity of Christ. And so, but for them to realize that we're doing this, that's the goal, and that's it. However way their hearts are transfigured, however way their hearts are moved by receiving this, and other people of the community see it, that's for the Holy Spirit to do. We're just simply trying to provide that service out of love.
Beautiful. Well, we'll be in touch with you, Father. I'll let you two continue the broadcast. Safe travels.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah. So one of the things that you're picking up on, Father, is that this parish, like so many others, is really got a laser focus on these aspects, and that's why this is so timely. And the more examples we can share of what other parishes are doing successfully, the better the universe is, because we can all make each other stronger and better in that regard. And that's why I'm so grateful to you. Okay, here's what we're going to do, because we've been on now for a while here. So we're going to take a short break. And when I return, my special guest, Father John Kokolis, and I'll be discussing more about what Nativity of Christ Church in Nevada, California is doing in the areas of philanthropy, outreach, and evangelism, including some very specific and exciting activities they're doing. And again, remember, just like we got a call, we'd love to hear from you at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-246. And feel free to call us and share what you or your parish is doing in these important areas. So let's take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Bill will be right back, but the lines are open if you want to ask a question or offer your thoughts. The number is 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO.
It began in 2004 with one streaming station playing Orthodox hymns and chants in many different languages, and a few talk programs and lectures as we could find them. About 10 years later, we added a talk channel and made the music channel, well, all music. Today, I'm pleased to announce a third streaming channel on Ancient Faith Radio, introducing the English Language Music Channel. You now have 3 choices on the Ancient Faith app and website. Share the good news with your friends and family. And as always, thanks so much for your financial support that makes it all possible.
Stewardship Calling is back, and we are ready for your call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here again is Bill Marianis.
So welcome back to Stewardship Calling and our first Wednesday program, where my special guest is Father John Kokolis. Please remember, we'd love to hear from you, so give us a call at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. All right, Father, before the break, you were walking us through the AC/DC model. We got as far as the A and the C, active and Christ-centered. Let's finish this off. Walk us through the D and the C.
Absolutely. So D is diverse. Are we ministering to every and each demographic of our parish? So when we first came to Nativity of Christ, there was really no group or fellowship available for young families and mommies. So my presbytera established mommies and me for an opportunity for young families to get to know one another and to establish that community. And the other demographic that we really weren't reaching was men. So a few of our parish council members created a men's group. We had unfortunately a long hiatus because of COVID, but we're vamping back up in the end of September. And we were able to gather all of the men of our community for fellowship. And one of the persons that asked me is, well, Father, what is this going to be? Is it going to be just, hanging out? Is it going to be, we're going service projects? Are we going to be doing things for the church? What is this what is this that we're doing? And my response was all of the above, because not only with the men's group,
the answer is yes.
the other is E, like D, yes, all of the above. So,
right,
because it's important to also have diversity within each ministry. So every ministry is going to focus on a different aspect of our Orthodox life, but the way we approach that and communicate that, we need to be able to be ready to be diverse, so that people are constantly feeling that there's an invitation to them to stay connected and to keep doing what they're doing. Obviously, there have been consistencies, but diversity with applying to each demographic, as well as within each ministry, offering that and ministering to those people.
Has there been any impediment? Yeah, has there been any impediments that you've seen, or any headwinds against that very important objective?
Well, no, it's all done with a sense of discernment. And when I'm talking about diversity, for example, the mommies and me, that it's, we do have fellowships after church for young families, for example. We also do offer a mom's night out, to where, the moms of these kids are able to leave their kids at home and just enjoy a time with one another. So, even with our seniors, that we have fellowship depending on the feast day. We also celebrate certain, secular holidays like Valentine's Day or something like that. But then we also have different speakers that come in. Someone talking about, I'm escaping on the term now, but fraud and being cognizant of credit card identity theft. Thank you.
Yeah.
And having also speakers about a lawyer coming to offer guidance on someone to do your will. So it's just diversifying what we're offering to the people on a constant basis.
Yeah. So that's really, really important in that regard. So that making sure that all of the constituencies within the parish know that this is their home and that this is where they want that, where there's something here for them, right?
Exactly. And I'll add to that discernment, which is you're also getting feedback from the people participating in this ministry. Right? You want to keep it exciting, but you also want to do what they continue to love. So if they're continuing to really enjoy a certain aspect of the ministry, you're going to offer that. But we also want to make sure that, again, we're continuing to minister to a diverse group of people in a diverse way.
Yeah. So one of the things that you mentioned is the importance of a men's ministry. And again, one of the things that the data shows is that the more actively engaged you have some of your men in your men's ministries, the more opportunities there are. I think that says something about maybe the spiritual disconnectedness, in some respects. But
well, how many times do we have men in our parishes who are waiting for their wives to say bye to people they're talking to at fellowship hour after church? Because women
I'm glad you said it, not me, because that's true.
Yeah, I see it all the time. I have probably the opposite problem with me and my wife as I'm talking to everybody. But so many, because naturally women are just naturally relational beings that like to speak and talk and communicate.
Sure.
And for men, we need to be able to facilitate that community so they also find their people and friends at church.
Right. Well, we have another caller in, so you must be very, very popular, Father John, because we have another caller that has something that they want to talk to you about.
Of course.
So, welcome, Gerasimos from Ontario, Canada.
Hello, Father John, bless.
Blessing, Lord be with you.
Thank you. I have an experience that I want to share. I'm an old guy, so I'm retired. And I had to go to the hospital today to meet a spinal surgeon who mercifully told me that I didn't need spinal surgery and I could just live with my pain. And as I was being wheeled out in a wheelchair, the young woman asked me how to pronounce my name, and I told her Gerasimos, and she asked what kind of name that was, and I said Greek, and then she said, well, Kanyis, and she says, that's all the Greek I speak. And she showed me her name tag, and she had a totally Greek name like Apostolopoulos or something like that.
Right.
And I asked her if she was close to her Orthodox church, And she said not at all, that her father had an argument with the priest some decades before and had taken the family off into some evangelical church. And I urged her to go online and read The Way of a Pilgrim, which is now available on YouTube as an audio book for free, to try to encourage her. And I was thinking about what you were talking about. There's such an outreach. We lose so many of our young people. I mean, I have 4 children. The eldest is 43, and the youngest is 34. And only one of them is any way, shape, or form close to Orthodox. All the others are absolutely taken over by the secular world. Although, they do have a phronema, which comes from their upbringing, which was quite Orthodox and quite loving. So they do carry that, but they don't ascribe that to our Savior Jesus Christ and his Orthodox faith. So I think that we lose a lot of the generation. I think I read somewhere that we lose 70 to 80% of each young generation. So I'm 74 years old, and I've seen a lot of generations come and go. And I'm now finding a lot of people, not just this one girl, but a lot of people who have been shunted out of the Orthodox Church. And I've never seen, in all my years since the days I was at Holy Cross, 50 years ago, in all my years, I've never seen a ministry towards those lost sheep. And I think it would be something perhaps for your generation to think about anyway.
Yep, I appreciate the comments, and there's so many things that come to mind when you're speaking of this example, Gerasimos, and I pray that you continue to have good health and our Lord is with you in your health circumstance. But I think what I would refer to, what Bill was opening up in this original evening's discussion, is this generation or this time that we live in. They're waiting for something extremely personable and extremely hospitable. So I would encourage, and I would make this distinction first and foremost, that this is not a generational issue or problem. This is for all of us. Our children are not the future of the church. They're part of the church today. Our seniors are not. No, of course. And so what I mean by that is that I want every generation, every demographic to make it a part of their personal objective to personally invite someone. So if we're calling someone and we meet someone who's disconnected to the church, to have a personal invitation, would you like to come to church with me? To have that personable invitation is the number one, and I'm sure Bill can spit out the statistics that support this, but that personal invitation is the best way that we can invite people to the church. And the more we're able to all be attentive to that, I think the more we're better to approach the great problem that you're addressing tonight.
Of course, if we go out into the highways and the byways and bring in the lame and the halt, the deaf and the blind and the sick, and we encourage them to come and be in our temples and worship with us, then we'll be so much better off. But we have to also, in doing so, we have to recognize that the lost sheep from our generations, so that I'm putting it in a way so that it accords with what you're saying. We have to look for these lost sheep, and I really think, and I'll leave it at that. I just think that this is a ministry which has not been actively developed, and I always thought it should be. I didn't do it. Other people did, perhaps to some degree. But look, thank you very much for being online. Thank you for your ideas, and thank you for your hard work. I recognize what a terrible difficulty it is being a parish priest today. It's a remarkable achievement to be able to stand at the holy altar and to be a priest. It's when I say a remarkable achievement, it's God's achievement in man. And the mere fact that you give your life over to it, it's a great martyr, a great witness. And I'm grateful for that, personally, Father John, as I advance into my older and less healthful years. So I thank you for your blessings. And I say good night to both of you.
Well, Gerasimos, thank you so very much. And as Father said, we will add you to our prayers, and thank you for the work that you're doing and the spirit that you bring to it, and the excellent point you make about the lost sheep. Now, this is actually, I think, maybe a segue of sorts, not a direct segue to the fourth element that you talked about in your AC/DC plan, Father, and that's the C piece.
The C piece is communication, and we've talked about that some, Bill, already. Which is having constant visual, informative, attractive, and diverse communication within our parishes. And to Gerasimos' point is that to be able to continue to send that information to people who haven't renewed their stewardship, to people who haven't been coming to church, so that they're still informed of what's going on in the parish. But again, through diverse and attractive and informative medias of communication, such as email, social media, the monthly bulletin, word of mouth. As I mentioned in my presentation, we also did an end of year kind of collage video that's available at our website, where we kind of just reminisce about the years past and everything that we did and accomplished as a community. Another way to communicate the active and Christ-centered and diverse ministries that we're having.
Yeah, and I want to encourage everybody to take a look at that. So please tell them where they can find it on your website, because I think it's spectacular.
Yeah, it's www.nativityofchrist.org. Under our media, there's a video link that you link to see our 50th anniversary commemorative video, as well as this 2020 highlight reel that we did to highlight everything that we were able to accomplish despite of COVID in 2020.
And when you look at their website, folks, I want you to notice the fact of what Father just said, kind of matter-of-factly, but is so rare in so many of the so many of the church websites I see. They have one of their tabs that says media on it. And when you click on the media thing, you can see there's the videos, there's the newsletters. Of course, that's where they'll put their live streaming and so much of what they did to celebrate their 50th anniversary. So the point of the communications message is not just the notion that you're doing it, but the how you do it and the way you do it that makes it so accessible to various different audiences, because people have different learning styles. Some people just like to read it. Some people like to watch videos and things of that nature. And I think that's very powerful. And I think also you said something that you kind of skipped over. You said it very quickly, and I want to highlight it. When I asked you how big the parish was, you said, well, we have 260 families, but we serve about 350. So the fact that you knew that there is that large a constituency out there that is within your reach to serve is itself very telling in the intentionality of the way you do things. And I can't tell you the number of times I'll ask a priest or a layman, how big's your parish? And they got to estimate as to what the size of their stewards are and ask them, how many more do you serve? And they have no clue. So I commend you guys for having that.
Well, that 350, to be honest, that 350 is an estimation from my vantage point as well. But it's a matter of, because we have certain stewards that are active and that not only actively give financially, but actively participate in other ways. But then, there's so many of these other Orthodox Christians that I hear about when unfortunately when a family member passes, and they would still like a funeral when someone goes into the hospital, and that we minister to them. So this is part of, again, what Gerasimos was referring to also, is that trying to find ways to continue to reach out to these people who are clearly disconnected from the church for a variety of reasons.
Right. But the fact that they were on your radar screen, that you even had an approximation is what I'm suggesting that everybody needs to be attentive to, just like Gerasimos said. Now, so we talked a little about the AC/DC approach, which I think is very fantastic. But you had a second thing that you alluded to earlier. Why don't you get into that second element? Because I think that's also critical.
It is. It's very critical. And the second element is showing people that we care. And that's both intentional for our current stewards that are currently our stewards at Nativity of Christ, to make sure that we realize that we care about them. New stewards, those stewards who are new to the parish, recently chrismated, recently baptized, recently moved into the area, as well as future stewards. And those future stewards are, we have no idea who they are. We have no idea how the Holy Spirit will affect or transfigure the hearts of people that we're trying to reach out to through our philanthropy and through our different mediums of outreach. So for some examples that we have here at the church that I will say is that the first aspect that I'll highlight to show people that we care is by ACDC Ministries. And because the best way that ACDC Ministries is accomplished is by reaching out to parishioners, to inviting them into the parish. So we've tried to instill into our ministry leaders and heads the empowerment to reach out to people who have not yet connected into their particular ministry. Because when we reach out to parishioners, we're showing them that we care. When we ask someone to do something for the church and giving them a job, we have to realize that we're not doing that as a negative. We're doing that to show that we want them involved. Because oftentimes when they say no, because they won't always say yes, but when they say no, They'll also say, thank you for reaching out to me, but it's just not a good time for me. They'll acknowledge that we reached out to them. And so the second example that I'll say that, is connecting to current stewards is our visitation ministry, is that we have a large geographical area and that we've separated by geographical location and paired them with parishioners who are wanting to volunteer as visitation ministry so that they're visiting shut-ins, people in skilled nursing facilities or assisted living centers, so that we're able to visit them. So it could be a group as 1 or 2 people or as large as 10, bringing them some kularakia, bringing them some surakia or sweets or an icon based upon a feast day of the church to show them that the church still cares about them and we haven't forgotten about them. So we have that demographic and that list of people available to that where we reach out to them and to continue to visit them. So that visitation ministry that has been established several years ago at this parish has been an amazing opportunity for us to be intentional and visual with the way that we're visiting people who are not able to come to church. And the biggest component and demographic that we've been able to adhere to during COVID is when we obviously all of a sudden had parishioners. All of our parishioners are now shut-ins, right?
Right.
So we made our kularakia and our breads for the festival, and COVID hit. And we basically made the decision that we would take our existing shut-in list of 20 people and expand that to 80 people to include all of our seniors who are really being instructed to not leave their house at all. And we created these very nice baskets, decorated them, and have various families, both young and of all ages, to be able to minister and to carry these baskets and deliver them to their homes so that they saw a visual and intentional way of seeing that the church cares about them.
Yeah, and the power of what you're talking about is not, I don't want anybody to miss this because it's so easy to miss when you're focusing on the people you're serving, which is phenomenal, the people you're visiting, the people you're bringing the sweets to, or whatever the case may be. But there's 2 other constituencies that that you're addressing. Number one is those doing the serving. We know that when you serve others, the Lord reinforces that behavior by the release of certain hormones in our body, oxytocin and dopamine and other chemicals that make us feel good when we serve someone else. But the second constituency ties back to something you said earlier. When the children see the adults serving others and sharing with others and caring for others, it further implants that as something that we do in our communities, right?
Absolutely. You mentioned some, again, scientific research, but at the same time, we need to recognize this is how God created us. God created us with the ability to, not only the ability to love, but to want to love, to be loved. And so when we do these expressions, it is indescribable the way that it could affect us and transform us. And our stewardship cards, we have different sections to where you can fill out interests that you have. And the most dominant section that people have is feeding the poor and administering to the homeless. So
Yeah.
it's something that I think is very substantial and relevant in even today's secular society, that coincidentally is the gospel, and for us to
Right.
accent that and to do that.
Right. And that's the point, that God has hardwired us to for service, not only with the capacity, but also by reinforcing it in the way we react to it. Now, one of the things that I hear in every parish that I work with is how hard it is to get volunteers involved in parish ministries.
Right.
But I sense that it's a little different in Nativity. So why don't you share with us a little of the few ideas of some of the things that you've been able to achieve to engage the faithful in the incredible and transformational work that you're doing?
Well, I wouldn't say that we're we're not subject to the same difficulties as every other parish, because we are. It is difficult at sometimes to get volunteers, but the best thing that I can say is for all of us to be excited and to be creative. Is that if we're not excited about what we're doing, then how are we going to get other people involved? If we're doing
Right.
things out of obligation or a sense of responsibility, other people are going to sense that, and they're going to be much more resistant to try to be involved. But we're excited if we're creative, if we're really motivated about what we're doing, that's going to be, that's going to be communicated. And to your point, Bill, is that it's much more difficult to call people and ask, could you work the gyros from 1 to 3 o'clock at the festival, versus, will you come to the church and help us make sandwiches for the poor and the needy? Those two
Right.
different communications do hold weight and value.
Yeah, and I think that this is a part that I'm so glad that you featured, because it's so critically important when we talk about excitement and creativity and motivation. Of course, everybody is, as we talked about before, hardwired by their creator to reinforce that kind of behavior. But at the same time, people are busy and they have challenges. And just like Erasmus, who called, who is suffering in pain and things of that nature. So you are by nature someone who is very enthusiastic and smiles a lot and creates a sense of energy and enthusiasm, and that can't help but replicate itself in the ministries and the people that you have around there. So what are some of the things that you do? What are some of your secrets? Give us some of your secret sauce, Father John, that you do to keep your level of enthusiasm and excitement and energy going, that you share with your parishioners.
Yeah, well, I would say, Bill, that it's contagious. Everyone listening to this who might feel that, how do I get that level of enthusiasm or energy in my parish? It starts with us. We all have to look inward to find that enthusiasm that we're applying to our parish. Because I do see where I continue to be enthusiastic and energetic with what I'm doing is when I see the parishioners responding. And we continue to feed off of each other. Because it just takes a few. When 2 or 3 are gathered, Christ is in the midst of us. It just takes a few people to be energetic and exciting about something that's happening at the church. And we all have to have faith in the Holy Spirit that's going to be contagious to the other parishioners, that they're going to realize the vision and realize the objectives of what we're doing in parish life, for them to want to be a part of it.
Yeah, and that is the contagious part. As a matter of fact, people who serve always report how much happier and fulfilled they are, that the service just makes them feel better. So do you have any examples that you can share with our listeners that you've heard from parishioners about how so much of the external work that you're doing with regard to service and helping people has transformed them, or any examples that you've heard from the beneficiaries of your parish's philanthropy or outreach or evangelism work?
Again, yeah, I would say it's contagious from a community level, from a parish level, as well as contagious as we feed off each other from outside of our community. It has been a blessing as we've shown people that we've cared. One of the examples is we've partnered with a local nonprofit and have made sack meals every month, and a different ministry will be spearheading the effort on a monthly basis. And when we put those stickers that I alluded to earlier on the sack meals, we've had responses from people outside of the community who have either benefited from receiving the meals or have witnessed other people benefiting from receiving these sack meals and thanking us for the work that we're doing. And when we're talking about communication, when I receive that, because I'm the beneficiary of receiving it as the priest, I'm not quiet about it. I'll send an email to the entire community. We'll put it in the parish bulletin to again spread that level of appreciation, that level of generosity, that level of impact that we're having on our local community, and the fact that we really are making a difference. We really are doing things that are Christ-centered and hopefully transforming all of us for that, again, energy and that enthusiasm to be contagious.
Yeah, and Father, I really appreciate you're using that example and basically serving as that example, because one of the provocative questions that I and others ask is, and it really is intended to provoke thought, is when we go to a parish group and say, if your church ceased to exist, would anybody in the community notice? Other than they might miss your ethnic festival, right? And when you do things like you're doing, some of the examples that you provide of what your parish is doing, you are making a difference in the community, and people do notice, and people do want you to be an integral part of what they do.
Exactly. And the sad thing is, if a parish would cease to exist and people wouldn't realize how much the parish is missed, because they wouldn't connect the good works that a parish is doing to the actual parish. And I just think, again, that visual is important for the local community to understand that we are a community and a parish centered on the love of God that we're trying to communicate to others through our love for God.
And I hope that, you've given so many jewels tonight, but I hope that amongst them that people take away is this resistance, really, to kind of share the good news of what works are available to be done and what they're trying to do out in the community, not as a matter of boastful pride, but as a matter of just, the gratitude that you have in being able to serve someone else. And I think that's a great contribution that you add to that mix. Are there any other examples that you wanted to share? Because we're running short on time here, but I don't want to leave out any other examples of some of the ministries and outreach and philanthropy work that your parish is doing that's so wonderful.
Well, the one thing that I'll add, Bill, as we're closing, is that we've made a decision that we no longer rent our facilities to private events. We solely rent our facilities to parishioners as well as nonprofits. So it's really opened up our schedule and opened up what were our objectives and goals of what we want also our facilities to do. So we recently teamed up with a local nonprofit called the Series Community Project that provides meals for low-income and families, as well as families that are in need of medical attention. And they use our facilities. They do rent the space, but it's, again, for an objective that is with everything that we're trying to do and showing people that we care. So the other examples is that we have a holiday gift drive done by another nonprofit where we simply host, and 200-300 people come to wrap thousands of gifts in a matter of an afternoon. All we simply did was provided our facilities for that. So our people aren't working towards these goals, but again, we're being an example to the community that we are open to instilling and continuing the service of others by offering our facilities in that way as well. So there's multiple different ways and avenues that we can express to the parish that we care and to the local community that we care as well.
So that's beautiful. I mean, just the notion of committing the facilities that your stewards were kind enough to create and allowing it to be fostered for other viable good service that's being done is just yet another testament. All right, listen, are there any final thoughts or closing shots or parting words you want to impart? Or, I mean, you've given us so many great ideas and so many good philosophical understandings. Anything else you want to say before I wrap it up here?
Bill, I thank you for the opportunity. I would just communicate to get excited and to be creative. We can't expect people to be a part of our church if we're not excited about what we're doing. So we all constantly have to ask ourselves why, and constantly be inspired and constantly try to do what God has called us to do, which is to love God with all our heart and to love neighbor as ourselves. And the more we're passionate and excited and creative about those two commandments, then the more we'll be able to accomplish as a church, locally and globally.
Father, you put a perfect capstone and exclamation point on it, and the enthusiastic way in which you communicated it, I'm sure, is not lost on anybody. So thank you so very much. I really want to, that's all the time we have for tonight, but I really want to thank Father John Kokolos for the incredible witness and the work that they're doing at Nativity Christ Church. I hope that you'll take an opportunity to take a look at the work that they're doing there. They're in Nevada, California, and they have a very accessible website. I also want to thank, as always, my Ancient Faith Radio producer, Matushka Trudy Richter, and the rest of the great team at Ancient Faith Radio Ministries that make all this possible. You don't know this, but we had all kinds of technology issues tonight, and she just patiently worked through all of it. So grateful. If you find any of these Stewardship Calling First Wednesday or Fifth Sunday shows to be helpful or informative, please tell your friends and have them tune in either live or to the archive podcast version. This program is recorded and it'll be released as a podcast in a couple of days. And you can always find them by going to the Ancient Faith Radio pages for Stewardship Calling and just look for the date. Today's date is September 1st, 2021. Or you can go to my website, stewardshipcalling.com, and I have an Ancient Faith Radio Internet Ministries tab, and you just scroll down to September 1st, 2021. And I'm very pleased to announce that my next guest for the October 6th, 2021 First Wednesday program, we're going to keep it on the West Coast and in the metropolis of San Francisco. And I'm so excited to have Dr. Eve Tibbs as my guest. She recently published a great book entitled A Basic Guide to Eastern Orthodox Theology. And the foreword to this wonderful book was written by none other than His All Holiness Patriarch Bartholomew I. So Dr. Tibbs is an affiliated assistant professor of theology at Fuller Theological Seminary and a brilliant writer and very articulate at what she does. Some of you who are regular listeners may know that I interviewed her husband, who's one of my partners at Orthodox Ministry Services, Steve Tibbs. But now we're going to focus on the brains behind the organization, Dr. Eve Tibbs, and we're going to really get into the wonderful work that she did in this book on understanding the Orthodox Christian Church. Of course, we invite you to check out all of the other always free resources at stewardshipcalling.com or email me at bill@stewardshipcalling.com if you have any questions or if I can be of any assistance. And as I always end, I remind you that two of the most important days of your life are first, the day you were born, and second, the day you figure out why. So if you're not living your stewardship calling, please begin by prayerfully discerning your why and your stewardship calling, and then start to live the most extraordinary second part of your life. Thanks for listening. God bless you. And as always, I pray that you SOTPAETJ, which stands for stay on the path, capital T, capital T, and enjoy the journey. God bless and good night.
The ancient faith for the modern world. This is Ancient Faith Radio.
Ancient Faith Radio is made possible by our listeners with help from Eliezer Wood Company, Orthodox owned and operated in northern Arkansas. A unique line of individually crafted wooden spoons and kitchen utensils made from locally sourced hardwoods. Our spoons, spatulas, and more make wonderful gifts and accompaniments to your family cooking traditions. Look them up at EliezerWoodCO.com. That's EliezerWoodCO.com.
This is Everyday Orthodox with Elisa Bielatich, a live listener call-in show where we share the stories of everyday Orthodox people as we get to know the members of the body of Christ. Join the conversation. We invite you to call in with questions at 1-855-AF-RADIO, 1-855-237-2346.
Welcome to Everyday Orthodox. It is July 18th, 2021, and we are live on Ancient Faith Radio. We're also live on Facebook Live and on YouTube. If you go to the Ancient Faith Radio page on Facebook. That's facebook.com/Ancient Faith Radio, or the Ancient Faith Radio YouTube page. You'll actually see a live stream of this. There's no video really. It's just audio, of course, but you can listen there too. So it's kind of neat. But anyway, I'm Elisa Bielatich, and we get together every Sunday night to meet Orthodox people, everyday people, anyone. I always like to say, the movers and the shakers, the prosphora bakers, the Sunday school teachers, and the guy who just stands in back quietly. You never talk to him, and just anybody in the church. And tonight, I think you're really going to enjoy our guest tonight. Her name is Presbytera Caroline Pavlakos. And now, she grew up in Brooklyn, New York, but now she and her husband are at a parish in Newport Richey, Florida. So I'm sure there are a lot of differences between living on the beach in Florida and growing up in Brooklyn. And we're going to hear all about that and all about her story of how she ended up here as a young new mom, a teacher, and of course a presbytera there in Florida. So Caroline, welcome to the program.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me tonight, Elisa. It's so exciting to be here.
Oh, it is exciting to have you here. And also I want to tell our listeners that you're welcome to call in with questions or to join the conversation if you like. You're welcome to call us at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Matushka Trudy Richter is right here to take your call and to put you live on the air. So give us a call. Anyway, so Presbytera, I would love to hear your whole story. I know it starts in Brooklyn. Were you actually born in Brooklyn?
So funny thing is, I was actually born in New Jersey, believe it or not. I was actually born in New Jersey. So my story begins in New Jersey. My parents, when they got married, they bought the house in Brooklyn.